It has no gut. It has no anus, no jaws, no stomach acid, nothing that should let an animal eat anything at all. And yet this pale thread of a creature, barely 2 centimeters long, lifted out of shallow Mediterranean sediment, eats plastic. Not metaphorically, chemically. You are looking at an animal that should not work. It tears apart the same class of material we press into forks and food wrap, and it has been doing so for longer than your lineage has had bones. Now the stranger part. The plastic it eats was never made by us. Bacteria invented plastic first. When a bacterium ends up with more carbon than it can burn, it packs the surplus into dense white granules called PHA. Long chains, water-resistant. A carbon backbone. In some bacteria, these granules swell until they fill most of the cell. By every definition that matters to a chemist, PHA is plastic. Evolution simply got there first. It is also one of the only plastics on Earth that fully biodegrades, which is why we now farm those same bacteria in steel tanks to make greener packaging. Nature filed that patent hundreds of millions of years before we existed. Sit with that. Plastic existed before we did. The rule was always tidy. Microbes make PHA, and only microbes can break it down. Animals were locked out of the pantry. And the worm at the center of this story, Olavius algarvensis, looked like the last creature that could ever pick that lock. It gave up eating entirely. No mouth, no gut. Instead, it farms. A dense layer of bacteria lives just beneath its skin. That layer is what makes it white, and the worm survives by digesting them. Livestock carried inside its own body. The bacteria feed it. The bacteria recycle its waste. It outsourced survival so completely that evolution simply deleted the organs it no longer needed. So when researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Marine Microbiology looked closely at one of those symbionts, they noticed it hoarding huge amounts of carbon as PHA. A walking warehouse of natural plastic wrapped in worm. The question was simple. Can the worm get in? Yes. In a study published in Nature Ecology and Evolution, the team reported an enzyme in the worm that snips PHA chains into pieces small enough to absorb, and they checked where this enzyme actually sits. Not in theory, but in high-resolution images of real tissue. It was being produced in exactly the spot where the worm digests its bacteria. Not scattered. Positioned. A can opener mounted precisely where the cans are stored. The worm didn't stumble onto plastic. Evolution built it a key for a lock that, as far as anyone knew, only microbes could open. One weird worm. One enzyme. You could almost shrug. Don't, because the researchers asked the follow-up question. If one worm carries this enzyme, who else does? They searched genomes across the animal kingdom, and the answer came back absurd. Related PHA-cutting enzymes turned up in more than 66 animal species, spread across 9 different phyla. Marine worms, starfish, sponges, earthworms, even a springtail, an animal smaller than a grain of rice. And it wasn't just DNA on a screen. In lab tests, enzymes from a sponge, an earthworm, and a springtail genuinely broke PHA apart. Read that again. 9 phyla. This enzyme is not a one-off oddity. It looks more like standard equipment. Until now, the assumption was nearly total. This carbon reserve was microbe-only territory, sealed off from the animal food web. The worm proved the seal could be broken. The genomes proved it was never sealed at all. As one of the study's leads put it, animals have probably been feeding on nature's original bioplastic for hundreds of millions of years. We're only discovering it now, which redraws a map. Under every mudflat, soil bed, and shallow seafloor, microbes have been banking carbon as plastic granules, and animals have been quietly robbing that bank the entire time. Every spoonful of coastal mud holds this quiet economy. Microbes save. Animals withdraw. A carbon pipeline no model included. How much carbon actually moves through it? Nobody knows. Not roughly. Not at all. The researchers say so themselves. And the timing is strange. We are now manufacturing PHA ourselves as a green replacement for conventional plastic, betting that nature knows how to dispose of it. Nature's disposal crew, it turns out, is far bigger than anyone assumed. And it has been on shift since long before the first landfill, the first factory, the first polymer. And it has mouths, guts, and in one case, neither. A 2-centimeter worm with no mouth held a secret big enough to edit the textbooks. which leaves an uncomfortable thought. If we miss something this widespread, in animals this common, doing something this fundamental, what else is the sediment hiding? Right now, beneath some quiet stretch of coastline, the ground is full of plastic no factory made, and full of small, patient mouths that learnt to eat it long before we learnt to name it.